Hey everyone, Asaf from Dark Horse Cycling here. I just wanted to talk to you before the event tomorrow. To those of you that are racing the Penticton Grand Fondo or the Okanagan Grand Fondo, and just to give you some advice on the race itself, as I have a lot of experience bringing different teams to this event and winning it several times with both the men's and the women's category, and also the teams category. Um, so since it's getting close to 9 p.m. on the Saturday, we are going to focus primarily on the day of, um, and obviously from this point on, just ensure you get a good night's sleep and try to wake up with plenty of time to prepare for the start of the race around 7 o'clock. So on the day of the event, the start of this race here at this location is usually quite hectic. The corral is very big. There's lots of people that come to this event, and it's very important to just be there on time to find a good place at the start on the start line. If you decide to do a warm up before the race, that's good. But I would encourage you to consider keeping yourself warm passively and have a good spot on the start line rather than trying to get a warm up in and then missing a good spot because you'll be standing hundreds of riders back. And since this year they've changed the course and you're going to go to the east of Penticton rather than to the west and north towards Summerland, things are going to get pretty tight right from the get go. So having a good starting position is going to make a big difference. Now, it's also going to keep you safer because people at the back will try to move up, and people from the front are going to get past. So it's going to get bunched up at different spots along this neighborhood section. And since these roads are quite twisty, you're gonna have to navigate through quite a bit of traffic. So again, find a good spot at the start line, even if it's at the expense of a good warm up. Now, if you do have time, you do want to get the nerves out by doing a warm up. Here's a quick recommendation of what I normally give to my athletes. So this is a very simple structure. You really don't have to do any more than this, especially tomorrow since it's going to be probably a pretty warm day. So you start with a warm up about an hour before the start time. Again, tomorrow be careful with that because of the corral. 15 minutes of just nice zone one, nice and easy. Let your body just warm up on its own. Don't try to bring it up to temperature by hammering. Just ride at your own pace for 15 minutes. Then 4 minutes, you just want to go a little bit over your race pace, a little bit over your FTP if you have that, or if you've tested it some other way, then you want to just go a little bit over that threshold. Now, then you calm it down with 6 minutes at zone one, and you go ahead and do two 30-second hard efforts that will simulate an attack and the race and rev it up, cruising at speeds within the 30-40 seconds, and then follow up with 5 minutes at zone one. So basically a 30-second sprint with 5 minutes of recovery. You do that twice, and then you complete the warm up. You eat something. You want to start eating as soon as you can. I would encourage you to even eat something right when you get on the bike for the warm up. That's going to calm the nerves down. Have something in your stomach just to ease that stress before the race. That really, really makes a big difference. Of course, if you are quite sensitive and you have a sensitive gut, then you may want to ensure that you have enough time to go to the washroom before you get to the start line. But if you know that you don't have an issue, then start to consume something before you get on the bike for the warm up is probably a good idea. Okay, back to the race. So now you're at the corral, you're in a good position. If you have somebody with you there that came to support, then I would encourage you to stay warm by putting some sort of a jacket or something, just an extra layer to keep you warm on the start line because it may take a bit of time before they start you off. Once the countdown begins, hand that thing over to your support crew and then start the race with very light layers because it's going to get very hot. And this race is in many cases dictated by the temperature on the day. So Penticton, as we all know, can get very, very hot. And this is something you want to bear in mind and not having to carry all of that extra layers. So this race this year starts off with this neighborhood loop. And I know this climb very well. I've raced it before in a different race. It's not very steep. This is something that is not going to break the race apart, but it is technical. So again, what you want to do is to ensure that you don't accelerate too hard. If anybody thinks the race is going to go at that point, they have another thing coming. There is plenty of time to catch back up, but you can open gaps just because of how technical this thing is. So it's like um, a circuit race with big hills in it and fast descents that are quite technical with chicanes and a lot of places where gaps can open up. So be sure to stay as close to the front as you can, not being on the front, of course, but just as close as possible. So you're not bunched up with a lot of people that can't control their bike, and it just gets quite sketchy. So after that section, assuming that you found your space in a group, you're going to be cruising down to the first hill on the course. Now, this hill is new. It's a new addition to the race, so I'm not as familiar with this one as the rest of the course. But again, since this is only coming around the 30K mark, something like that, again, this scale here is in miles, so it's going to arrive somewhere around like the 20, close to 30 miles an hour, 30 kilometers. You should still be quite fresh as well as everybody else. And if you're inside the pack, you're just going to cruise over this no problem. From this point on, this course just flies down. There's no need to be concerned about getting gapped or getting dropped. It's just a nice false flat downhill all the way to the base or to the turnaround back to Oliver. Now, these little hills here, if you have someone supporting you, this is a great location for them to wait up and give you some water. Because if you're planning to ride in the first group on the race and you don't want to get dropped or you don't want to lose the pack by having to stop and refill your water bottles, you want to ask whoever is coming to support you to stand around this area here, around this mark, right at this point. I'm going to leave a link to where this is located exactly on the map. So if you have somebody that's coming to support you, please use that link and tell them to wait for you over there. This is the place I've used multiple times. Handing water at this section is very, very easy. The speeds are not very high. And so for you, as someone who needs to grab the bottle, and for them who needs when they need to serve it, it's going to make life a lot easier. But again, this entire section is something that you just want to stay deep in the pack, not expose yourself to the wind. It's a nice road. It's not technical, and you just arrive at the bottom with much ease. Beyond that point, you're going to loop back around, and this is where the race really starts. So we're getting into the last third of the race. And from the moment you loop back around, you want to start moving up in your pack. So whether you're in the first group or another group, it doesn't matter. The reason why is because it's going to get harder and harder to position yourself at the front of the pack the closer you get to this big climb. This climb goes up next to a golf course, and this is where the race begins. Up to this point, it's all about energy management. So you have to make sure that by this point you feel good, you feel relatively fresh, you've drank a lot of fluid, both electrolytes and water. You've eaten something every 20 to 30 minutes, and preferably something that's going to digest a little bit more slowly than just pure gels and sugar. So you arrive at this point feeling quite good. From this point on, it's game on. And what's going to happen on this climb? A lot of people are going to try to detonate your pack. They're going to put on a very hard pace, and it will be up to you to make sure that if you're close to the front of the pack, those that are trying to pick up the pace are right next to you, and they can open up a small gap, but you're still cruising within your pack. So you can allow several people to go past you as long as you're somewhere within the group. Now, if you start too far off the back and you can't hold this pace, you won't catch back up. It's going to be very difficult to catch back up. So trying to stay well within the pack is a great idea. At this point, it's an aid station. If you're in one of the first groups and you want to stay with it, don't expect to stop there. Nobody will stop at this point because this is essentially where the race opens up. So it's going to be hammer time from this point on. And of course, if you're just coming here to get a good result or a good time completing this course, then I do suggest to perhaps consider stopping here, refueling, so you have enough energy for what's to come. And what's to come is this little bump here is hidden inside a forest, but after this point, it's all exposed. You're exposed in the sun, you're sitting quite high up, and it's going to get pretty warm at this point because you'll be climbing quite a bit. You're not going to move too much. The wind isn't going to help cool you down, and it's just a constant up and down, very hilly section. And it can get quite windy as well. So this is where it's going to get harder. But I haven't seen too many splits happening on this section. So if you are able to survive this section here, where the race opens up in the pack, you should be able to survive this section and make it to the end of this hilly section. If you do, and you make it to the top of this hill, you're good to go all the way to the end of the race with the pack you're in. Now, if you are in a good position and you want to get a good result, what I would suggest is to keep your powder as dry as possible until you get to this very section where the road turns from the lake towards Penticton. This final straight is where stronger riders are going to light it up. And the finishing straight is just a straight road that goes directly through the center of Penticton. If you have good legs, you can really hold your position at this point. And if you know your competition and kind of sensing where they're at, you can make a decision whether you want to surf wheels and attack them at the very end with a strong sprint, or if you want to try to get away and leave them beforehand. But I would highly, highly recommend to not try to do anything before you get to this left turn, because if you do, there's a very good chance that you'll be brought back when the road gets somewhat hillier at this final section, because it's not as high of a speed as the approach to it. So just ensure that you read your situation really well. You have plenty of time to do that on the descent. And if you can get a sense of where everybody's at, then you can make a decision. Also, depending on the wind direction, if you have a headwind, you may want to preserve your efforts slightly closer to the line and maybe avoid a sprint altogether and try to launch a breakaway slightly beforehand. And of course, if it's a tailwind, then you got to be very careful with that, because taking off earlier is going to become very difficult. And in that situation, getting closer to the line and trying to launch a sprint is probably a safer bet. So that's pretty much the race. Beyond that, it's a beautiful course to the first. If this is your first time, in my opinion, it's one of the better races out there. So go out, have a great time. Obviously, ride safe, keep rubber side down, and I look forward to seeing the results of the last drop.